Very importantly, this presentation is very much in collaboration with Rory McLeod, who is currently in Oxford, but is also a visiting researcher in Tartu since, I think, October. And so these slides are actually mostly all made by him, other than the final results that we have gathered together here in Tartu. So first, what is environmental DNA overall? So we have here also several photos of Rory in different ways, collecting that DNA. But so environmental DNA is DNA that is isolated from environmental samples, not skeletal samples, etc. And so it can be either soil or water or even air. And so we are not specifically using any organism, but kind of a material that includes many. And so where does the DNA end up from then in these samples? So a lot of it is microbial cells, of course, just because they're so numerous everywhere around us. But everything that lives in the soil or lives on the soil and then becomes part of the soil afterwards can be in these samples. So it can be skin or saliva and all these different kinds of secretions, eggs, blood, and also, of course, the roots and other parts of plants living in and on the soil, and so on and so on. And of course, when organisms die, once they decay, also their DNA becomes part of the surrounding soil. And so the sources can also come from different biomes and then kind of give us a picture of the different parts of our whole ecosystem. And as already briefly mentioned, it can also be actually from the air. And for example, there was this nice study studying the air of a zoo to see what kind of species live there. But then, since the focus here is on ancient environmental DNA, then the kind of, let's say, selection of sources is a bit more limited. And so the idea is that the source location needs to be protected from modern contamination. So it can be an archaeological site which is underground and protected from the modern environment by the top layers of sediment. It can be permafrost, where everything is frozen and beds are preserved due to that. It can be lake sediments, which again are at the bottom of the lake and hence protected from what's going on in the environment now. And it can be caves, which are protected because they are covering themselves, let's say. And so when we look at what has happened in biomolecular archaeology through time and then focus on the environmental DNA part, then actually the first studies already happened at the end of the last century. But recently there have been big breakthroughs, let's say. So in the last 5 years, the first nuclear genomes from environmental samples have been reported, and also very recently a more than 2 million year old metagenome was reported from Greenland. So we are expanding in the amount of data that we can get out of these samples and also expanding in the time that we can study. And then very briefly about the methods. So at first, PCR-based methods were used, as for all genetics. But since then, what is still used quite a lot is metabarcoding, where we are focusing on specific parts of specific genomes. But also metagenomics is now used widely, and this is what we are using and what I will focus on today. So metagenomics and shotgun sequencing means that we are sequencing everything that is in the sample. And shotgun sequencing is also what we used when we are studying specific species, like when we are using skeletal elements for DNA extraction. But in this case, we are really just sequencing everything that was in the sediment sample that we sequenced. So we have no idea what can be in there when we start. Or we might have some hopes, but we don't know. Yes, and so why not use barcoding? Why do metagenomics instead? So one reason is that with barcoding, we still need to start with knowledge of what we want to study. We need to target specific parts of specific genomes, whereas with metagenomics, we don't necessarily need to know at all before, and we can then try to look for whatever is there afterwards. And it is better suited for ancient DNA and gives us higher sensitivity and resolution. And also one kind of nice bit is that we can then authenticate that the sequences that we are looking at are actually ancient based on damage patterns at the end of fragments that you can see here. And now getting to what we have done here in Tartu. So this is really something that we have wanted to do for a long time, but have now finally started, thanks to the Center of Excellence, which we did get last year, which includes...
Just so much money, I can't remember where it came from.
Yes, so this is 7 million euros for 7 years, and in our case for 7 groups, so it's all about sevens. And this specific, let's say, part of the Center of Excellence is a collaboration between 3 of those 7 groups mostly. So us in archaeogenomics, then we have the paleoclimate and ecology team, and also archaeology. And sorry, I keep clicking on the images. So what has happened so far is that the paleoclimate team and Christina from our team went out in March. And so when we, before we had a picture of this lake course being taken from a barge, then in Estonia we have the nice advantage of sometimes having ice on the lakes. So we can do that without needing so much equipment. So they went and took fresh cores from a South Estonian lake and wrapped them right away there in the field, where during winter we are not expecting a lot of stuff to be floating around in the air, less than during summer. I wrapped them in plastic and taped them closed to protect from contamination. And then in April, Rory came to visit us. We went to the geology lab with a big team because we were all excited to see how to do this for the very first time. And what we did is, so we took samples from the sediment cores every few centimeters. We used syringes, so we cut off the tip, and then it's very nice to kind of push the syringe into the core, and then you get a nice clean small core out. So in the end, all the cores looked like this with holes in them. And the sediment from the holes went into tubes like this, which went into the freezer. And a bit later on, actually, in this case, it was already like 3 days later, we went into the lab. And so who hasn't been in our lab, then we have windows in our lab, which is a nice thing to have to take pictures of things happening in the lab. So the photos are taken from the corridor. And so they then extracted DNA from these cores and built libraries. And so the first results quickly. So what we wanted to do first was to test how much material is optimal to use in this extraction protocol. So far, well, Rory had done this in Copenhagen, and there it had been 50 milligrams of material, but we wanted to test if we could add more, because of course more material should mean more DNA, but because we are using tubes then and then certain amounts of buffer, then of course there is a limit to how much soil we can squeeze in there. So we started with 3 samples from different parts of the core, so from different times, and we tested 4 different amounts of extracted material. And the first thing that we saw that already when we measured the concentration of the DNA extracts before building them into sequencing libraries, then of course the concentrations are low because these are not amplified. This is just pure DNA from the sample. But it was really so that the more material you have, the higher the concentration. So we didn't reach that kind of upper level of how much we could squeeze into that tube. So already this gave us a hint that probably 400 milligrams is the best of these. But of course, we wanted to also see the actual results of the sequencing. And with that, so this is the oldest of these 3 samples. And what you can see here is that these plots are colored based on damage. So pink is not damaged, so probably modern, or at least very close to modern material. And green and blue are more and more damaged, so ancient. And what you can see is the more material we have, the more damaged it is, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense right away, but it's good, so it kind of confirms that more material is better. Okay, so but what we thought, so one thing is that this pink stuff is mostly coming from one taxa of bacteria that is very common in soil. So it is probably just contamination from the modern soil while sampling. And then maybe it's so that there is a little bit of this modern material in there, but because our library protocols are designed to prefer shorter fragments, then if we have more of these shorter fragments, so we have more ancient DNA in there because we have more sample, then this ancient DNA kind of gets to come out and is not amplified, so the small bit of modern contamination is not amplified to kind of fill the space. So in that sense, it is looking good for these 400 milligram samples. And when then looking more specifically into what kind of species do we find, then here you can see reeds that are uniquely aligned to Betulaceae, and these are damaged reeds. So we have ancient reeds, and so one member of this group is birch tree, for example, which is something that we know grew here already for a long time. And another example here is from a group that also includes linden tree, which also fits nicely. So we are getting species that we would expect, and they are ancient reeds. But of course, this is the very start of our work. And now we are planning to go forward with more samples and of course more analysis as well. So thank you very much.